Hello everyone, welcome back to the biology channel called Learn Bio with Janet. I'm teacher Janet and today we'll be studying Form 4 Biology, KSSM syllabus, Chapter 15. The subtopic is 15.7, Growth in Humans and Animals. The learning standards for today's lesson are as follows. 15.7, Growth in Humans and Animals. After this lesson, we should be able to explain the meaning of growth in organisms, determine the parameters to measure growth in humans and animals, describe the growth of insects with exoskeleton. So there are two types of growth, A, complete metamorphosis, and B, incomplete metamorphosis. Next, analyze the growth phases on sigmoid growth curves of humans and animals. And lastly, analyze the intermittent growth curve of animals with exoskeletons. First of all, the first learning standard, let us explain the meaning of growth. What is the meaning of growth in organisms? So growth in organisms can be defined as an irreversible permanent process which involves an increase in the number of cells, the size, volume, and weight of an organism's body. And this is due to cell division and cell elongation. Okay, so take for example this small turtle that has hatched from the eggs. So it will grow in size, and this process is irreversible, tidak berbalik, meaning that once it's grown to the juvenile size, okay, the young turtle, it will not shrink back to its to the size when it was small, right? So growth is an irreversible permanent process, and this is caused by an increase in the number of cells, all right, through cell division, and this causes the size, volume, and weight of the organism's body to increase. Okay, the length and the volume of this turtle will increase as it grows. So there are two processes that lead to increases in size and volume and weight of the organism's body, and that's cell division and cell elongation, right? So in cell division, all right, the cells in the young turtle will undergo division by mitosis to produce more cells, right? So the number of cells will increase, and after that each cell will undergo cell elongation. It will enlarge, and it will become bigger and bigger. So this leads to increase in size, volume, and weight of the organism's body, right? So finally, growth also involves one more process called cell differentiation. What does it mean? Cell differentiation is a process in which each cell undergoes changes in shape and structure in order to perform a specific function more efficiently, right? So cell differentiation means the process where a young cell, as it develops, it will change in shape and structure. That's cell differentiation. For example, in the formation of a neuron. Okay, so a neuron is a nerve cell. As it grows from the general shape like a round cell like that, with a nucleus, it will start to grow tiny extensions or thread-like structures called the axons, and also dendrons, and that helps it to perform its specific function more efficiently. Function of neuron is to transmit nerve impulses, so it has all these thread-like structures, the axons and dendrons, to help transmit the impulses from one place to another, right, more efficiently. So that's cell differentiation, and it leads to cell specialization, meaning the cell becomes specialized to perform its functions more efficiently. Okay, so in summary, growth involves three processes. Cell division, which increases the number of cells. Cell elongation increases the size of each cell. So these two processes lead to increase in the size, the volume, the height, and weight of the organism's body. And lastly, we have cell differentiation, in which each cell forms new structures and changes in shape and structure to become specialized in order to carry out its specific functions efficiently, right? So that's the meaning of growth. Now, what is the necessity or importance of growth? Why is it necessary for an organism like this turtle to grow? Why is it necessary for us to grow? So growth is important for the development and maturation of body systems in an organism. For example, as the turtle grows, its body systems will develop. The reproductive system, the musculoskeletal system will develop. So musculoskeletal system develops so that the adult, when it becomes an adult turtle, it can swim very fast, swim fast in water, right? And also reproductive system develops so that it can reproduce, right? So other body systems will also develop as it grows, and that's the importance of growth. Second learning outcome, determine the parameters to measure growth in humans and animals. So parameters are just factors that can be used to measure a process. For example, measure the process of growth, right? The factors that can be used to measure the process of growth. And there are many parameters that can be used to measure growth. Now for humans, just recall when you were younger, all right? Every year, maybe you would take your weight, measure your weight and your height, to check and see whether you have increased in height, how much you have increased in your height and weight, all right, for that year. Okay, so that is one way to measure growth. Increase in size, like in the height or in the length for roots of plants. For the snake, we measure the length of the snake, okay, from time to time, to record its growth, to measure its growth. And also increase in volume for certain organisms. Now, another parameter that can be used is increase in fresh weight, meaning the weight of an organism, including the fluid or the water in the body. All right. For example, weighing yourself to find the weight of your body, all right, each day. So if you drink more fluid, more water on that day, then your weight will be heavier, right, as compared to when you are dehydrated, when a person is dehydrated. So fresh weight, in a sense, is not so accurate to determine the growth of an organism, because the organism can drink more fluid and then his weight will increase, but that is not actually growth, because the fluid can be excreted from the body, right, can be lost from the body. So a better parameter for measuring growth is increase in dry weight, which is the weight of an organism after all the fluid is removed from its body. However, this method is not practical for humans, because the organism that needs to be investigated, all right, will have to be dried in the oven. The organism that's studied has to be dried in the oven first at 100 degrees Celsius to remove all the water, evaporate all the water from the body, all right. And to get the increase in dry weight, the organism is dried in the oven at 100 degrees Celsius repeatedly. Every time it's dry, it's taken out and weighed again, until the weight remains the same or is constant. That means that all the water is evaporated from the organism, and by that time, the organism, like the plant, it will shrink until it becomes like a very tiny mass of tissues when it's dried, in the dried form. All right. So because water makes up a large proportion of the body of the organism, right? So we are about 75% water actually. So this method is more accurate, but it is not practical if it kills an organism, all right, unless usually it's carried out for plants. We can find the dry weight of plants, but in the process we will kill the plant, right? Learning Standard 3. Describe the growth of insects with exoskeletons. A. Insects that undergo complete metamorphosis, and B. Insects that undergo incomplete metamorphosis. Let's start with complete metamorphosis. This is a type of insect development that has 4 stages of growth, namely egg, larva, pupa, and adult stages, right? So the larva stage differs greatly from the adult stage, all right? Differ greatly in morphology or structure, as can be seen here. Now this is the life cycle of a moth. So the adult moth will lay eggs, and then when each egg hatches, the caterpillar emerges. Okay, it's a tiny caterpillar at the beginning, and it is a voracious eater. You eat a lot of leaves in order to grow big very fast, to grow bigger. So I used to have a tree that was very healthy with green leaves, but after it was infested by caterpillars from a species of butterfly, the whole tree went bare. It didn't have any more leaves. We say botak, then it just died. Okay, so caterpillar, right? It will eat and then grow, and then after a while it will form a cocoon. All right, so it will be wrapped inside the casing here, and this is the pupa stage. From the larva stage, when it is a caterpillar, to the pupa stage. So in the pupa stage, it looks like it's inactive, but actually it is transforming very drastically to form the adult butterfly with wings that can fly in the air. All right, so there's a great difference in structure between the adult moth and the caterpillar, the larva stage. So the transformation is quite great, and that's why we call it complete metamorphosis. All right, from the caterpillar or larva stage to pupa stage to adult stage. Examples of insects that carry out complete metamorphosis are the butterfly, bee, beetle. So these three insects start with the letter B. Think of the bees. And then ants, moth, and wasps. So BAM. All these we must know examples of insects that carry out complete metamorphosis. How about incomplete metamorphosis? This is another type of insect development that has only 3 stages of growth: egg, nymph, and adult. No larva and pupa. No larva and pupa. So what is a nymph? A nymph is the young insect. Sometimes you call it the instar. And you can see here for the dragonfly, which carries out incomplete metamorphosis. When the egg hatches, it forms, it will allow the small nymph to emerge. All right. Then this nymph will undergo a few stages of ecdysis or molting, meaning it will shed its old exoskeleton that may limit its growth, or hinder its growth. So you shed the old exoskeleton and replace it with a much bigger one at each stage of the instar. So molting will occur a few times, and after each molting or ecdysis, the size of the nymph will become larger and larger. Okay, until the final ecdysis, then after that it will become the adult insect, right? So we will study that later. So the young nymph is similar in structure to the adult. All right, this is the young nymph or the young insect. More or less similar in structure to the adult, except that it does not have full-grown wings, and it is not sexually matured, so it cannot reproduce when it is a nymph. Now this is quite unlike the larva compared to the adult stage for complete metamorphosis. These two are very different, okay, but the nymph is similar to the adult stage for in the life cycle of an insect which carries out incomplete metamorphosis. Now, examples of insects that carry out this type of metamorphosis, incomplete metamorphosis, are the grasshoppers, cicadas, cockroaches, and dragonflies. Let's answer this simple question. Which of these organisms shown in the diagram carry out A, complete metamorphosis, and B, incomplete metamorphosis? Right? So take a moment to think about those organisms that carry out complete metamorphosis, okay, based on this diagram. Identify the organism first. All right. So the organisms that undergo or carry out complete metamorphosis, they have 4 stages of development, right? The egg, larva, pupa, and then the adult. So this complete metamorphosis occurs in beetles, beetles, C, bees, D, the ant, E, butterflies, and G is a caterpillar. So how about the organisms that carry out incomplete metamorphosis? Okay, so this include the bee, dragonfly. F is a cicada with longer wings and a triangular shaped body here. And then H is of course the grasshopper. Here's an interesting photo showing two monarch butterflies that have come out from the pupae. So the pupa stage of the butterfly is called the chrysalis, specially called the chrysalis. Here you can see one of the monarch butterflies, and it is a type of butterfly that's orange in color and quite large. And here you see the empty casing, the empty pupa casing, because the butterfly has emerged from a pupa. Whereas for this one, the pupa still contains the butterfly, right? So these two butterflies that have emerged are drying their wings before flying off, and it will be the first time that they fly in the air, having just attained adulthood after the pupa stage. Learning standard number 4. Analyze and explain the growth phases on the sigmoid growth curves of humans and animals. So what is a growth curve? How do we obtain a growth curve? We can plot the weight or the size or height or any other parameter of the organism against time, and that's how we get the growth curve. Now, the growth curve of most organisms is generally a sigmoid curve that is S-shaped, like what you see here, S-shaped curve, right? So this is a basic growth curve for most organisms. It shows that growth occurs gradually and continuously until maturity phase, where there is zero growth. Okay. Now, altogether, there are 6 phases in the growth curve here, based on their different rates of growth. There's the lag phase, where growth occurs slowly. You can see here the gradient is very gentle, it's low, the gradient is low. So this shows that the growth rate is low. Then exponential phase. In exponential phase, the growth rate is rapid, and then back again to slow growth phase. Then maturity phase. At maturity phase, the growth rate is 0. And then senescence phase during old age, and then finally death. So we are going to discuss these 6 phases in the next slide, right? And to find the rate of growth, we actually just find the gradient of the growth curve. Okay, so the gradient of the growth curve shows the rate of growth. Let's say we want to find the rate of growth at this point here. So draw a line that is a tangent to this point, and then from there draw a right angle triangle. Okay, so the value of y here, vertical line, over x, the horizontal line, gives us the gradient, as we have studied in maths. Right, so this part is important for SPM. It can be an SPM essay question. It also can be tested in the structured and objective questions. So explain the growth phases on the sigmoid growth curve of humans and animals. All right. So our growth curve is a sigmoid shape. Sigmoid growth curve. It's S-shaped, or it's a sigmoid growth curve. Now let's look at the explanation. So the first phase is called lag phase. So we must be able to explain what happens in lag phase. Lag means it's very slow. Now this is the early stage of growth, right? Like from when the child is small, okay, around 4 or 5 years old. The rate of growth is low. Why? Because the organism is made up of less cells, right, compared to an adult. So the cell division and that occurs is slow, and then there's also cell elongation. So there's a little cell division and cell elongation, and this is the phase of adjustment of the young organism to new sources in the environment, right? Then after that, there is the exponential phase, because the number of cells have increased, so the cell division occurs faster. Cell elongation also occurs faster. So the size or the height of the organism, the weight of the organism increases very fast at this stage. So here the growth rate is the highest, as we can see from the gradient of the curve. It is the steepest, right? The gradient is the biggest. And the organism size increases rapidly as cell division and elongation occurs actively. All right, so that's the exponential phase. Now, after that, as the organism reaches maturity, the growth rate slows down. Now, you can see here that the gradient becomes less again. So the organism is reaching maturity at the slow growth phase. Cells undergo cell differentiation to form specialized cells. So many cells are undergoing the cell differentiation, right? Cell division and cell elongation may have been reduced as the organism is reaching maturity, right? Now then we have D, the stationary phase, where the curve forms a plateau. All right, it's a horizontal line. So at this stage, what is the gradient? The gradient is 0. So there's 0 growth rate. The growth rate is 0, right? And curve forms a plateau. Organism has reached maturity. So for humans, this is around 18, 20 years, around there. So there's no more growth of bones, right? The height of the person won't increase after that already. And the rate of cell division is equal to the rate of cell death. Okay, so this means that cell division still occurs, but to replace dead cells only. Okay, for example, in the skin, cell division occurs to replace dead cells that have dropped off from the skin. So this is the stationary phase or the maturity phase. Sometimes it's called the mature phase, phase of maturation. Now, E, the fifth phase, after the lag phase, exponential phase, slow growth phase, stationary phase, we have senescence phase. So senescence means old age, right? This can occur after the age of 50, 60 years old, right? And the growth rate is negative. Why? Because now the curve is slanting this way, from left down to the right. So the organism undergoes aging. It's growing older and older, and there is maybe loss of muscle mass, and maybe the height may shrink a bit, right? As this occurs, as you can observe in old people. Then after that, there's the death phase, where the organism dies due to aging or illness or lack of nutrients, right? And that's the end of it. So you must remember the 6 phases here and be able to explain what happens internally to the organism. All right, so it will involve cell division, cell elongation, cell differentiation, okay, along the way, as if you're explaining the different phases of the sigmoid growth curve in humans and animals. So take note of this for essay question. Right, next we are going to analyze the intermittent growth curve of animals with exoskeletons. So we are not going to talk anymore about the sigmoid growth curve. We are going to look at another type of growth curve, which is the intermittent growth curve. Say this word, intermittent growth curve. Intermittent means periodic. It occurs on and off, on and off. So the growth curve is like a series of steps, or like a staircase. Unlike the sigmoid growth curve, which is shaped like an S shape. So what's the difference between these two types of curves, right? So there are two types of growth curves that we are studying here, the sigmoid growth curve and the intermittent growth curve. Now let's look at the differences. For the sigmoid growth curve, right, this is shown by animals and humans with the endoskeleton that does not hinder growth. So the growth occurs continuously until adult stage. But in the intermittent growth curve, for the intermittent growth curve, it is shown by invertebrates such as insects and also prawns and crabs and scorpions that have a hard exoskeleton which hinders their growth. Okay, so they will show intermittent periodic growth that is sudden in their body length when they shed their old exoskeleton and then get a new and bigger exoskeleton, which is on the outer surface of their body, right? Whereas in the sigmoid, for the sigmoid growth curve, animals that show the sigmoid growth curve, they show continuous and gradual growth. Now, and then for sigmoid growth curve, there's no ecdysis or molting or shedding of the old exoskeleton, as we will see afterwards. Whereas for the intermittent growth curve, the organisms have to shed the old external skeleton periodically, all right, a few times before they reach the adult stage. From the egg to the adult, from the nymph to the adult stage, they will shed the old exoskeleton a few times, the old exoskeletons a few times. So the graph, the shape of the graph is different. For sigmoid growth curve, the graph is S-shaped, and for the intermittent growth curve, the graph is a series of steps, or is shaped like a staircase, right? So examples of organisms with the sigmoid growth curve are humans, mammals like rats, and so forth. But for insects, for intermittent growth curve, this is shown by insects such as the grasshopper and cockroach, and also by prawns, crabs, scorpions, and other organisms. So let us discuss more about the intermittent growth curve. We have to analyze it and be able to explain the various phases. Learning outcome number 5. Analyze the intermittent growth curve of animals with exoskeletons. Now, first of all, let's define what ecdysis is. It is the molting process or shedding of the old exoskeleton to allow growth and development of insects to occur. So in this process, the old exoskeleton is shed and replaced with a new, bigger one. The old exoskeleton is shed and replaced with a new, bigger one, the green one. And this process is controlled by hormones. So during the growth of body mass and tissues, the exoskeleton is rigid and it does not grow proportionately with the body mass or body tissues. All right? So when an insect is growing, its body tissues are actually increasing by mitosis, by cell division through mitosis. All right? So the body tissues will then keep increasing until it grows. It has reached the full length of the exoskeleton. Then it's like getting to, there's no more space for the body tissues to grow anymore. Thus, the insect has to undergo ecdysis, all right, where it will shed the old exoskeleton here, or exoskeleton will split and it will come out from it, and then it will suck in more air to expand the new soft exoskeleton, the green one. So it will become bigger than the old one, right, than the old exoskeleton. And then there will be space for the insect's body tissues to grow again, okay, until the next ecdysis. So what is the importance or necessity for ecdysis in insects? Now, an insect has a hard, inflexible, rigid exoskeleton or cuticle made of chitin, which does not expand or grow along with the growth of body tissues. Okay, that is, the body tissues are growing continuously, but the exoskeleton does not grow. So the skeleton hinders growth. And for growth and development to occur, the insect must shed its old exoskeleton and replace it with a new and larger one through the process of ecdysis. Question here, explain the process of ecdysis, 5 marks. This can be an SPM essay question, right? So first of all, a new softer exoskeleton forms beneath the old hard exoskeleton of the insect. All right. So let's say this is the old exoskeleton and the insect is still inside it. So actually there is a new exoskeleton forming underneath this old one already, right? Then when ecdysis is about to occur, the insect will crawl onto a branch and then it will suck in air in order to expand its body and increase its volume. So the body tissues will increase in volume, right, through the sucking of air. But the old exoskeleton is still the same length. So through the expansion of its body, the insect will break the old exoskeleton, usually at the center part of the thorax here above. And then this will cause the insect to emerge. It can emerge from the old exoskeleton, as you can see here, right? So then the old exoskeleton of the nymph is already shed and that is empty inside. So when the insect comes out, it has a new soft exoskeleton that needs to expand, because the new soft exoskeleton is about the same length as the old one at the beginning. So it sucks in more air to expand its new soft exoskeleton, to expand its body. And before the new soft exoskeleton hardens. All right, so as it expands its body, the new softer exoskeleton will also expand to become much larger in size than this old one, right? And then it will stay on the branch for a while until the new soft exoskeleton hardens. Okay, and by the way, this is the time when it becomes vulnerable to predators because it's lying still on the branch, right? Anyway, as it sucks in air to expand its new soft exoskeleton, it is increasing in body length and the growth occurs suddenly. So this is shown by the vertical part of the growth curve, okay, as you will see later. Then ecdysis is repeated periodically until the insect achieves its maximum size in adulthood. So once it has come out and has a new soft exoskeleton that is bigger, the body tissues will continue to grow and increase in volume inside the new soft, new exoskeleton that has hardened. Okay, no longer soft, it has hardened. So for a period of time, some days or weeks, the body tissues are increasing in volume until it reaches the full length of the exoskeleton. Again, then it will have to shed its exoskeleton, okay, and get a new bigger one. So ecdysis is repeated periodically until it reaches adulthood. Okay, for grasshoppers, it is ecdysis occurs 5 times, right, during the instar stage or the nymph stage. Let us look at this important question which can be asked in SPM. Analyze the intermittent growth curve of animals with exoskeletons. Learning standard number 5, right? So here you can be given a diagram of the growth curve and be asked to explain. You'll be asked to explain the shape of the growth curve, right? So this has come out in SPM before, this growth curve. So we must be able to explain it, all right? So this is the intermittent growth curve of animals with exoskeletons, such as insects, scorpions, spiders, crabs, prawns. Insects like grasshoppers, cicadas, dragonflies, right, and cockroaches. Right. So let's explain the growth curve of the insect or grasshopper based on this diagram. Firstly, we can say that the graph of body length against time is a series of steps, or looks like has the shape of a staircase. And this shows periodic growth or intermittent growth that occurs during ecdysis, right? During the times of ecdysis only you can see the sudden increase in body length. Okay, so periodic growth or intermittent growth, meaning growth that occurs once in a while, not continuously. Now, the horizontal part of the graph. So we break up the graph into the horizontal and vertical sections. First of all, the horizontal parts of the graph here, for the first instar, second, third, fourth, and fifth, indicates zero growth because the gradient is zero. gradient of the curve is 0. So stages, these are the stages of the young insect in between ecdysis, all right? And they are called the instars or NIM stages. Now the insect is not increasing in length during these stages. Okay, let's start with the first instar. The insect is not increasing in length because of its rigid exoskeleton, right? Now let's start from this part here first. So when the egg is laid, it will be in the ground for a while or on the leaves, and then after that it hatches. When it hatches, the first instar comes out, the first NIM, all right, it's of a certain length, and then the instar's body tissues will be increasing, all right, through cell division by mitosis. So although the length of the exoskeleton remains the same for some days, inside the body of the insect, it is building tissue and increasing its body mass gradually and continuously, right? Until the body mass has reached the maximum volume inside has reached its maximum amount inside the exoskeleton, and the exoskeleton becomes tighter already. So it's time for the insect to shed its old exoskeleton. That's when ecdysis occurs, right? So the vertical lines here represent sudden rapid growth of the exoskeleton, the new exoskeleton during ecdysis. Okay, and then we have to explain the process of ecdysis. Okay, so the insect first sucks in air to expand its body and split the old exoskeleton so that it can emerge from the old exoskeleton. Next, it sucks in more air to expand its new exoskeleton here. Expand its new exoskeleton before it hardens. So at first, the new exoskeleton is soft, so the insect can suck in air to expand it. Then after some time, sometimes it's a few hours, the new exoskeleton hardens, and then that's when the size of the exoskeleton is already expanded, okay, becomes longer. Okay, then this is when the insect size increases rapidly during ecdysis. Okay, when the insect sucks in air to expand its new exoskeleton, right? And then the insect will live in this new exoskeleton for some time until again it has reached, the body tissues have reached the maximum volume inside this exoskeleton. Then it's time to carry out ecdysis again. So ecdysis occurs 5 times. The molting or process or shedding of the old exoskeleton in ecdysis occurs 5 times until the insect reaches adulthood. Okay. Now in contrast, if dry mass or mass of the body is plotted against time, okay, the growth curve will be a sigmoid curve like this. So we can take the center parts of all these points of these red lines and then join them together to form a smooth curve, and you look like a sigmoid curve, like for the growth curve of humans and other animals. Okay, because the body tissues are increasing gradually and continuously. Okay, so this is the growth curve for body mass, right, or dry mass of the insect. So take note now, there are 2 curves actually. For body length against time, okay, for insects like grasshoppers, the growth curve is a series of steps. But for body mass, it is not. It forms a sigmoid curve. And here, lastly, we see the picture of an instar or NIM. All right, this is a young insect, and you can see that the wings are starting to grow already. So when you observe a grasshopper, you can know whether it is adult or not. It's in the adult stage or not. Look at the wings. The wings are full grown, long, and covers the whole length of the body. That means it is an adult grasshopper. But in this case, it is a NIM, right? So here are the notes and the answer to the question. It can be an SPM essay question. Now the question is, explain the growth curve of the organism based on the diagram. Okay, so you have to know that this growth curve is for insects like grasshoppers and animals with exoskeletons. Okay, since I've already explained the answer in the previous slide, I will just read through this very quickly. The graph of body length against time is a series of steps showing periodic growth or intermittent growth during ecdysis. The horizontal parts, the red parts, of the graph indicate zero growth. Stages of the young insect between ecdysis are called the instars or nymphs. The insect is not increasing in length because of its rigid exoskeleton, but it is building tissue and increases its body volume or mass continuously. Then the vertical lines here represent sudden rapid growth of the exoskeleton during ecdysis, okay, where the old exoskeleton is shed and the insect has a bigger, newer exoskeleton. The process of ecdysis. The insect sucks in air to expand its body, and this splits the old exoskeleton. The insect emerges from the old exoskeleton and sucks in more air to expand its new exoskeleton before it hardens. Thus, the insect size increases rapidly as it sucks in more air to expand its new exoskeleton. Ecdysis occurs a few times, about 5 times in the graph here, okay, 5 times in the graph here, until the insect reaches adulthood. Now, in contrast, if the dry mass is plotted against time, the growth curve is a normal sigmoid curve. So take note that this growth curve that consists of a series of steps or looks like a staircase is for body length of the insect against time. Only the body length, not the body mass. The diagram here shows the life cycle of a grasshopper, right? Starting from the egg stage. So the egg hatches to produce the first instar, which is a very small grasshopper. Then as the body mass increases and the tissues inside the grasshopper increase due to cell division, it will be time for the grasshopper to shed its old exoskeleton, which will become too small for it, right? So for growth to occur, it has to shed the old exoskeleton, and then the second instar will be produced, which is a bit larger than the first one. So consequently, ecdysis occurs to produce bigger and bigger sized grasshoppers. Okay, and then at a certain stage, the wings will start to form. All right, and the wings will grow longer and longer. Finally, after the fifth ecdysis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth ecdysis, the adult grasshopper is produced, right? With well-developed wings and so also well-developed systems, body systems. And it will be able to reproduce. All right, then the life cycle repeats again when the egg is produced. Here's a good SPM forecast HOTS question for you to try. Based on your analysis of the graph below, explain the human growth curve that is shown. Now we know that the human growth curve is generally a sigmoid curve, but if you look at the specific growth curve for humans, actually there are 2 sigmoid curves. As you can see here, there's this first stage during infancy when the growth rate is fast and the gradient is steep. The gradient of the growth curve is steep, and also during adolescence. Okay, you can see another steep section here, a curve where the gradient is steeper, right? So during infancy, there is very rapid growth, and then during childhood, the growth rate slows down a bit. Then during adolescence, there's rapid growth again, and then during adult phase, there's no growth, and during old age, there's negative growth. So our answer must look at each part of the curve, each section of the curve, and explain it. All right, we must be able to explain the different sections of the curve. So let's look at the answer. So again, let's now look at the answer for this HOTS question, SPM forecast HOTS question. Based on your analysis of the graph below, explain the human growth curve that is shown. Okay, let's look at the answer. So firstly, we can say that in humans, the growth curve consists of 2 sigmoid curves. Now, this is the first one, and then here, the second one. So the first sigmoid curve involves the infancy, And then the second one, the phase of rapid growth is during adolescence, right? So there are two rapid growth phases, which are during infancy and adolescence. And in between these two phases, there's a slower growth phase, which is called the childhood phase. Somewhere between, say, 2 to 10 years before puberty begins, 2 to 12 years. So based on the graph, the phases of human growth are infancy or infant stage, where the growth rate is very high for both boys and girls, and the gradient of the curve is steep. Now here they don't have the two different growth curves for boys and girls. Do you know that boys and girls have different growth curve, especially during adolescence? Because girls attain puberty earlier, okay? And then after that, boys. So anyway, let's look at the childhood phase. The growth rate decreases after infancy. Then during adolescent phase, the growth rate becomes very high again. Now, at first, girls attain puberty at around 12 years of age, and they have a higher growth rate than boys, okay? So this is very obvious, especially when the students are in Form 1 to Form 3. You see that the girls are taller and bigger size than the boys, because they have attained puberty, but the boys have not during those years. But then later, after 2 years, generally boys attain puberty around the age of 14 years after Form 2 or 3, and they suddenly shoot up. They grow faster than the girls. All right, but for both cases, during the adolescent phase, between 12 to 18 years, the growth rate is high. Okay, now after that, the growth rate slows down here in the slow growth phase, because the individuals are reaching maturity. And then during the adult phase, when they have attained adulthood around 20 years old, the growth rate is 0, right? The person reaches in maturity, and the cell division occurs mainly to replace the dead cells. Doesn't cause the bones or the size of the person to grow anymore. After that, around the age of 50, 60 years old and beyond that, the growth rate becomes negative, because the individual is undergoing senescence. So size of body decreases and muscles degenerate in old age, right? So this essay answer is 10 marks, and for each line or sentence is about 1 mark. So it adds up to around 10 or more marks here. Okay, so take note of this HOTS question, because the explanation of the human growth curve is not in the textbook. Right, so that's the end of our lesson here. I hope that you have learned something from this. Do share, like, and subscribe. And see you again in the next video. In the next lesson, I'll be sharing techniques of answering SPM Biology Paper 3, which will be tested at the beginning of next year, very soon. So do share, like, and subscribe. Thank you.